Thank you, Anurag. That was a great start. Yeah, it did say State of the Union, and that sounds like really heavy and I guess a little too old schoolish for the kind of topics that Anurag was talking about. So while you'll see economic trends, various types of trends from various pieces of data, economic data and other forms of consumer data and retail and commerce data, some of it is publicly available data from various sources, some of it is Nielsen's own data, a lot of it is our own projections and forecasts. But I guess the main point for me to take home in the next 15 minutes or so is that one, we know that we have kind of re-earned back the tag of the fastest growing major economy. So clearly very big and getting bigger. And still the point of view that I would like to suggest as we go through the next 15 minutes is that we are really yet to explode. So I guess this is what we need to keep in mind, and that's the central piece that I want to leave us with when we talk about something as big time as State of the Union. Okay. So again, a lot of data that we are aware of, but it's the context around that information and multiple sources of information, and like I said, some of it is our own. So this is where we are this year. We are, in real terms, as we know, we are already the third largest economy. But in nominal terms, when you just look at dollar and rupee in their own value, 2018 April IMF numbers, we've just about crossed Germany, that and then what's the 2019 number? 2019 forecast from IMF will be in the top 5. So it'll be crossing France and crossing the UK. So this is the IMF forecast. So this is the kind of pace of movement that's happening. And sometimes we don't stop and sit back and think what's happening to our economy. A lot of stuff is going on in the global world. Some markets are doing well. Many of them are doing well in patches. Couple of years they're doing well, and then they're having a bit of a slowdown period. But it looks like we are constantly playing that 6%, 7%, 7.5% GDP range. And what it's doing, it's steadily moving us ahead. And being a top 5 economy is really kind of something to think about. And as we think about this, the forecast that IMF and World Bank has, goes up to 2023, 2024. So we did a little bit of forecasting ourselves a year and a half back, and it already looks kind of out of date, but I'll still kind of talk about it. So when we were sitting in 2016 end, we were trying to forecast more of a 15-year GDP cycle, and what we find is that there are many major economies in nominal terms, not even in real terms, that really represent us within our geography. And you can see some of those are big markets. Turkey is a big market. For any global company, and I'm sure there are many global company people in this room, Turkey is a huge market. Mexico is a huge market. Argentina is. And if you do that forecast, you find there are more and more markets that become India in another 10 years, 12 years' time. And that's really compelling point to keep in mind, that this is the pace where it's going. And still there is so much of opportunity for us to take forward, and which is what I think parts of this presentation will talk about. And I think it's important to realize that we have our inflation that's been going up again. Last year and a half, inflation has been going up. We are talking about crude oil prices. There is political instability that's going on, and all kinds of things are happening. But still what we find is that the economy just keeps moving on in that 6-7% range and keep doing this. In fact, we did this forecast, like I said, a year and a half back, and we now feel that that's a low forecast. And I'll end the presentation with, closer to our heart, the FMCG industry, which usually correlates quite well with the GDP. What did we forecast there a year and a half back, and where are we in real terms in 2018 now, which will be a little bit of an eye-opener for us and hopefully for you as well. So with that, the important point here really is that when the market is moving this way, what is it that's coming out as underlying themes of this movement? And while there will be many things, I've just tried to crystallize into a couple of big head points, because it's easy for us to get lost in the details of the 7 drivers and 10 and 12. But really, if I look at the opportunity in the India market, the first point I would say, and that is on the growth and the revenue side, is the diversity that this market offers. And there are many lenses to the diversity. One of the themes of today's conference is inclusiveness. But really, inclusive growth, I think, is the biggest one. And I'll show you 2 or 3 examples of the inclusive growth that we're talking about here. But that's really what we're talking about here. Big time inclusiveness in the growth. And many companies are targeting this in many ways. So some are looking at breaking up the country into many geographies, and very creatively defined geographies, not just states, but in terms of contiguous territories that have common purposes and interests. But the real diversity is coming from as you look at the cross-pollination of consumers and technology and how they are going. So you see a lady here at that age, but very, very savvy with the digital world. And you see here a modern trade store, but we can see the kind of shoppers we are talking about, right? And this is happening. This is real here and now happening stuff that we can see. So this whole cross-fertilization, and like Anurag, you spoke about what do we learn from outside, a little bit of this outside-in mix-up that's happening, that's creating this continuous stream of growth that's there. And you look at many of the other markets, Indonesia, Russia, China, you find good growth there, but you don't find the consistency of that growth. You find, again, China has gone through a dream run, but it's slowing down now, right? Similar stories for Russia, Indonesia, Mexico, and so on. So that's one side which gives you growth. But what are the enablers of that growth? And that's where I come with the whole concept of convergence here. And convergence can be thought of many ways. It's really how do you create sustainable growth where you get profits out of it, where you get scalabilities, where you get efficiencies of using today's technology, right? And that could be on the media side when you outreach to consumers and how consumers engage with you, as well as in terms of the commerce side, how do you distribute your products and goods, how do transactions happen, how do commerce happens. So it's really, really important to understand from the lens of how we are in a converging economy with a lot of diversities available. Those are the two key themes I think we need to kind of think of. One is an enabler. Convergence is an enabler to really creating that growth and profitable growth, I must say, because that is what's really happening. Barriers to entry are falling. Companies of all kinds are coming in. Some of our data shows, I don't think we have shown it here, but small companies are doing much better than larger companies. They're growing at a much faster pace. And that's not a base effect thing. Even a large number and base of small companies, and I'm talking about 1,000 crore companies, they're growing very, very fast today. So because of utilizing technology, and that's one of the central themes again here today, because of the use of that, because of the network benefits that we get out of it, because of the efficiency and the scalability we get, there's really a sea change in how consumers are today interacting with us, how we are interacting with them, how we are creating both our viewership channel and our distribution channel. And in simple Nielsen terminology, we call this watch and buy. So the first part is called watch, where you are reaching out to the consumer and they're absorbing, taking, receiving content and receiving messages, and then the buy is where they're buying. And so if you keep this in mind, I'll give you a couple of examples of that in the next few slides to talk about diversity first, both in the world of watch or consumer consumption and consumer views, and then in terms of the buy. So let's look at diversity, and again, there's a fair bit of stuff on this slide. I will not get into each of these, but I will leave you with a few moments from all of this that you see. The key thing again being wherever you want to focus and target, there's a big enough mass for us to really work on. So if you look at age demographics, and this one I'll talk a little bit more in detail, so I'm going to skip it now. But we've always talked about ourselves in the last 10 years or so as a youth economy, and a lot of populations in the youth and everybody gunning after that. But if you look at the silver liners, you'll find an equally compelling story, and I'll show you some startling data of other countries versus us right now here. But similarly, you look at education, highly educated people, Indians are really highly educated, and the really wealthy, polarized, educated people, we're talking about, there's 50 million of those there, and then there's the others who really are not yet in that cycle, and perhaps primary school and below, and you've got a really big mass there sitting around. And these are some of the numbers that we forecasted up to 2030 to see the quantum of these sizes. So if you were to go to the masses, how would you go? If you were to go to the people who are not educated, how would you go? And what's the size of that segment or cohort 10 years, 12 years down the line in 2030? And how would you target the real super niche? And that's where the different trends are coming up. Again, single units are growing. If you look at large-scale studies, it will show that single units are growing. They're growing a little faster than the overall size of the population growth. And there's going to be enough of those and lots of family units, right, at households. Urban, rural, we'll talk a little bit about that, and you'll see the headline on it. But essentially, the big point there is that if you look at the long term, urbanization is going to be the big theme. Just as a matter of statistic, today, household expenditure, 33% of that comes from urban. By 2030, that will move to 49% or 50%. And this will be concentrated only, out of the top 100 or precisely around top 88 cities. So we'll have 1 million plus 88 cities, and those 1 million plus cities, those 88 of them in all of India will corner 50% of expenditure. So if a marketer were to just go to those cities, 1 million plus, 50% of the market is covered. But having said that, there's a huge growth in rural that's happening, and I'll show you some of that growth that's right now happening in the last year or so, and forecasted forward, and with a very large proportion of sales going in there. Similarly, if you look at media, and this is the point I was making, we are seeing a big effect of multi-screen coming in and parallel media playing out. There's very interesting data there recently come out that we'll talk about, where we are really seeing the media channels are moving forward together versus just the digital economy. While we'll talk a lot about digital here, we do want to see what's happening in the traditional media side as well. And as a result, when we think about trade, how do you play in this digital world, in the virtual world, and how do you play in the physical, traditional world of the modern trade is a very important decision that marketers need to take, and our sales and distribution system needs to take into account. So just let's talk about a couple of these ones without getting into each of the details. So if you look at age, it's a funny one really. So we looked at all the major economies, including China, in Asia, the ones that really kind of take hold. Korea, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia, all major economies of Asia. And if you add them up and you look at their age distribution in terms of the young and the old, what you find is that collectively they have, a young population of 125 million. Ours is 340 million. If you look at the other side of the spectrum, really the silver liners, the people who have got a lot of wealth today, retired population or semi-retired, you find all these countries put together is short of 100 million, and India is sitting at 120 million in terms of the forward forecast. And then if you look at the people who are working, the salaried people, etc., and you compare to China, you find again going forward into the future world, China is going to be 0.98 billion of this middle-age cohort. India will be 1.05 billion. So whichever way you look at it, you want to target the middle, you want to target the aging population, you want to target the little emperors, you really find this huge growth. And so one axis I thought I'll talk about a little bit more in detail and how this plays out. But similarly, you look at any of the other cohorts. So this is coming back on media here really, and very recent numbers. It's a TV-dominated market, we know it, right? And we also know that digital is growing like crazy. We know digital is like completely taking over. But look at the middle box. We say print is dying. I don't know if print is dying. So 3-year CAGR number, television has grown by 6%. Internet is obviously growing in crazy numbers. You can't even do the base right. But you look at print, it's grown 9% in the last 3 years, right? So you've got 3 major mediums of consumer outreach which are there that gives you the diversity and the coexistence across whether you want to reach them on TV, print, and internet. And consumers are consuming all these mediums. Some of them have many nuances. There's changes happening within television, within print, and within internet, and we won't get into that. But essentially, there's a multimedia opportunity to reach to consumers, and consumers know and how to use and take each of these mediums. And you can see that there are big numbers on reach. You can see, 800 million on television, 400 million on print, and the internet number will keep growing, and there are forecasts of 300, 350 million as well right now in terms of active daily users, right? So similarly, again, just staying on the digital world a little bit where there's explosive growth happening, just look at what's happening with the smaller town data. So this is really metros and the larger towns, smaller towns, and the really small towns, 1 to 5 lakhs. Just 2 years back, the reach numbers on video streaming, this is video streaming data, just the reach numbers you can see. There was a bit of a difference there across the town classes. If you look at engagement, which is time spent, again you can see there's a difference. Today, it's almost uniformized. So and why it's happened, we'll talk about that. But just look at the lift has happened not just in the bigger cities and the metros. It's happened across all the town classes to 1 to 5 lakh towns, which are really small towns we're talking about. And then this is video streaming, across. So as digital as it can get. We're not talking about TV and print here. Just going over to the retail side, the most diverse and the most complex retail market. Again, in the whole space of FMCG, if you look at the store count, India corners 1/3 of the global store count. So 30 million stores, we've got 10 million of them here. And a huge set of intermediaries that play out here. So a very complex and diverse distribution system that can be leveraged by us in a good way. Similarly, if you look at it within this, we're talking about this huge traditional trade distribution system, but modern trade. Modern trade is today crossing 10% and is already getting a 1.5x growth versus traditional trade. So wherever you look at it, in this combination, you find that there's a plethora of diverse growth opportunities. This one is from urban versus rural. Like I said, last 1 year, rural is definitely outpacing urban. So you see both urban growth being very heavy and rural going even top of it. And that gives us a lot of thinking around what can marketers do. Because you've got premium products. Today we've got a bunch of super premium products across all sectors. Look at what's happening to luxury cars, and I will talk about luxury cars in a second. But premium products across the sectors are doing very well, but the market for mass products remains really, really big. People are seeking convenience with fast life, but there's a lot of value seekers as well who don't want to pay the price premium. So there's premium seekers who will pay for price, and there's other ones. You look at proximity and time saving, that's a big one. At the same time, people are seeking experiences and going all the way out from unique holidays that they are doing to all kinds of experience-seeking behaviors that you see. Similarly, there's indulgence and there's health. So there's a very varied set of choices for marketers here, given this diversity of geography, of age, of education, of media consumption. All of these have such polarity and diversity that you kind of see this happening really here. Just quickly, I'll move into convergence and give you that concept. And the convergence is coming primarily from, I think, the digital world, both in terms of buy as well as in terms of watch. So interestingly, a couple of years back, and again, this is just 2 years apart data, Wi-Fi was very, very big, right? So there was a lot of consumption happening on Wi-Fi. People were downloading and then reading later on. Look at what's happened to cellular data. So from our smartphone panel, from the Nielsen smartphone panel, if you look at the data, there's been a 10x growth. So there's 10 GBs of consumption on the smartphone panel we see per month of consumers. So now cellular data has become really big with the dropping prices. And that's important to understand because now it's not about downloading and viewing later on. All the time people are on the mobile phone. And similarly, if you look at the reach numbers here, video streaming has gone to 97% reach in a kind of smartphone world, shopping at 82%, payment apps at 93%. So you can see how there's a full democratization of media because of digital that's happening. So today, lots of products can really be sold on this medium. We don't need to go to only print and outdoor and television to sell. We can really outreach consumers and a certain set of consumers, who have a smartphone. And smartphone numbers are today easily gone to the 350, 400 million number. So a good third or more of the economy today is sitting on smartphones. Just flipping out on e-commerce, same thing you see. E-commerce today is projected, it's already sitting in 3-4% of the Indian retail base, and it's projected to get to more than 10%, 11% by 2030. You can see where it's going. 300 billion is the number we are projecting out of a Goldman Sachs report. And today, not even thinking about 2030, today if you look at it, in FMCG, where it's the slowest, and you'll see the FMCG numbers, the e-commerce is the least on, yep, I'm just closing out. So what you see here is that even today, there are cities like Bangalore where certain categories have more than 10% e-commerce sales. So in FMCG, in a city, in certain categories, you see 5-10% e-commerce sales. So that's really where it's going, FMCG. And apparel, fashion, accessories, mobile phones, the numbers are a lot bigger. So again, there's a huge onslaught happening here on this one. And what's essentially happening is each of these segments, traditional trade, modern trade, and e-commerce, they're really learning from each other and converging on each other. And today, e-com is getting into offline and opening stores, and modern trade is getting into proximity and lots of small stores like what traditional trade does. And traditional trade is putting technology and infrastructure big time into them. So each of them are converging and learning from each other, and that's really the big message here. I know we're kind of a little short of time. Just a couple of points I'll make here is that the growth is happening across sectors. So if you look at the opportunity, there's growth happening in the last 4 years across sectors. Not just your DTH and smartphones and internet, but look at QSR, outside eating, branded apparel, durables, hospitality, everywhere, education. You find there's a lot of growth happening in all of these, across all of these industry sectors and pockets, not just in the digital enabled sectors. Just a couple of points here. This is the cheapest online data country by a long stretch, and look at how the prices have dropped from 2016. 9 cents to now 0.05. That's how our data prices have dropped, and smartphone prices we're aware of. So this is one of the fundamental things that's driving this revolution. While everywhere in the world it's dropping, but it's not dropping to almost a 10x drop that's happened from 77 cents to 5 cents now per GB. And you can see the effect of that happening everywhere. Just going back on video streaming, we saw a big uptake when there was a free data period that Jio did. But look at the period after the free data period. So this was that it keeps rising way after that as well. So it's a sustainable consumer behavior that's come into play in the last 2 years, even after monetization has come back into play. And you can look at video streaming, social networking, gaming, everywhere you can see that trend. Just one last point to make here, and this is where I guess there's a lot more leverage marketers can do, and that's why I'm talking about the opportunity here, is while we are seeing video streaming has gone up big time, there's been a 9x, 10x growth there, shopping and payment apps are still yet to grow to that proportion. So there's still a lot of traditional buying methods that are going on, and once that grows, you can only see where the explosion is going to come, and that's the reason we are calling out, it's yet to explode. While the consumer is pulling us in by engaging with the media, and engaging with us and content in a big way, that shopping is still not picked up enough on the digital world, and there's a big, big opportunity for marketers to really leverage that. And with that, let's look at the e-commerce world. The e-commerce world is again led by the East, not by the West. The West numbers are not that big. You can see Germany sitting at 0.7%, USA at 3%. After such a long time, you can see some of the markets, France is doing a good job. But the real story is sitting in the East. South Korea at 18% e-commerce trade, China at 14%, Taiwan at 5%. And India has been rapidly growing, and this is FMCG I'm talking about, where the numbers are the smallest. So this is just FMCG. India has already gone from close to 0% to 1% in the last 1.5 years. And we are projecting this to become a big number within FMCG as well. Automotive, I talked about it. Big growth happening in automotive. It's just become the 4th largest auto market. Just beat Germany in automotive to get to this. So it used to be behind Germany. Now it's the 4th largest market. And again, there's growth happening across the spectrum. Compact vehicles, 32% growth last year. Utility vehicles, which is a big bellwether of the auto industry. And luxury is now really starting to grow as well, 12 to 14% growth there. And we are not even gone to the EV space that Anurag spoke about, which is perhaps the big new change that we'll see as electric vehicles come in. So last point here, we forecasted in 2016 certain FMCG numbers, and we said that there are certain factors which are controllable, like the ones here that marketers can do, and certain are not controllable. And depending on how marketers play it out and how the uncontrollable factors play out, we were projecting a baseline CAGR growth of 9 to 11% on the FMCG sector. If things were normal, if things went very, very well, and lots of these things happened, then we said that the growth rates will be in the 11 to 13% range. I just want to close this presentation to show you what we forecasted in 16 and where we are, and this is in the FMCG world. So we said 9 to 11% should be the normal growth. Optimistic CAGR is 11 to 13%. I'm just going to show you this one last slide, which is most recent data, just published maybe a couple of weeks back, or not even that, in the FMCG world. And you can see the growth rates, 2017 growth rates and 2018 growth rates. And you can see they're all in the range of 11, 12% in the overall level. And then you can see some of the other pockets there. So growth in rural, which we talked about, grocers growth, but look at the modern trade growth. Look at some of the geographies, how they're growing. So when we said, 9% growth, 10% growth, and best case 11 to 12%, 13% growth, this is what we're seeing in FMCG. And there are so many sectors which are growing much faster than that. So that's the big headline message. It's yet to explode. We are forecasting, and everybody's beating those forecasts. It's a good place for the nation to be in, a good state of the nation. Thank you.